I want to ask you a question. Have any of you ever written a letter? I mean by hand with a pen and paper? I mean not email, not posting on the FaceTube. Have you ever gotten out that nice, new, clean piece of paper and you got your good pen and you try to write very neatly and tidily and say something meaningful and interesting, and then you send out that letter and then you wait for that reply? I want to ask you, how long would you wait for that reply? I've had this experience recently. I had to write to somebody by hand, someone very special, and I wrote them many, many letters. And I put those letters in the mail and I waited for the reply. And I would come home every day and open the mailbox, hoping that I would see something besides a bill or some junk mail. And I waited and waited and waited. How long would you wait? Would you wait for weeks or months? How long would you wait for that reply before you used the F word? I want to tell you where I learned the F word. I learned it from my parents. My father in particular. You see, when I was a kid, we used to go on vacation every year. We rented a little beach house. And every summer we would go there for 2 weeks. I was so excited about this trip. I would start packing 2 weeks before we went. I would pack up my little bathing suit and the little plastic shovel for the sand and those inflatable beach toys. And I would put them in a suitcase and just wait. And every year it was the same. We'd get in the car and my parents would pack up all their things, because that house was a little bit remote. There was no supermarket. There was not even a phone in that place. And every year we'd drive in the car, me and my sisters and my family, and about 20 minutes into the ride, my mother would say, "I'm sure I forgot something." And my father would say, "Well, no, you probably didn't." We always managed to do without whatever it was if she did forget. But one year was a little bit different. You see, that beach house was about 2 hours away by car. And that time it was very quiet for the first hour. We were kind of surprised. And then suddenly, my mother said it. "Oh my God! I left the iron on!" And then I could tell, we all could tell by the intensity in her voice and the way she sounded that she wasn't kidding. And my father looked at her and, well, that's when I really learned about the F word. Well, what are you guys thinking? What I mean is that my father had faith in my mother. You see, my father knew that if he didn't turn around and go back, that those next 2 weeks would be absolutely miserable for him. Because first of all, how could my mother enjoy it? You know, how could she relax? Even when we got there, she couldn't call anybody at home. Who would she call? So we had to turn around and go back. So I want to talk to you tonight, ladies and gentlemen, about faith. What were you thinking? Well, for those of you who ever listened to a Zig Ziglar recording, he also said that too. And, you know, faith is kind of important. And all my life, I always wondered about faith. You know, when we're raising up, our parents tell us, or maybe we go to church or something, maybe people tell you to have faith. Well, what is that exactly? Is it limited to a particular religion? Is it limited to people who only believe in one thing or another? I don't think so. I think it works for everybody. But what exactly is faith? Does that mean that we say a prayer or we wish for something and then we just wait for it to appear? Is that what faith really is? And I started thinking about it, and I realized that I've had some other experiences that have shown me that it's not only this. You see, I think there's 2 other ingredients that are important in your faith. regardless of whether even you have religion or not. And the first ingredient that's really important is you. You are the most important ingredient in your faith. I don't think you can say a prayer or wish for something or ask for something and then just sit there and wait. If you're going to do this, it's just like playing the lottery or going to the jockey club. It's just like gambling. You really need to put some effort into it. And the second thing is what we were talking about tonight. 2 heads are better than 1. The second thing is getting the support of your loved ones and the people who care about you and people who could possibly help you with your goal. These, to me, are the 2 key ingredients in faith. And I can tell you I learned this because my parents also used the F word in other situations when I was young. You see, when my father was 7 years old, his mother died and he was abandoned by his father. And so he grew up in orphanages and foster homes. And he didn't find out that he had a sister until he was, 20-something years old. He was already married. And so when he found this out, he found this old letter that had this information in it. And him and my mother began to search for his sister. And believe me, they prayed a lot, but they also did a lot. My mother found a stack of other letters my father had from his relatives, and she found a partial phone number and address. And she ordered all these telephone books. This was the 70s. From that town where the letter was from. And she searched in those phone books number by number by number to find even a partial match for that phone number. And she would call up everyone who even came close and asked, hey, do you know these people? Do you know this person? So you see, she took action. My father took action too. They consulted lawyers and they did a lot of things to make it happen. But they also involved the whole family in it. I always helped my mother with these activities. And interestingly enough, after searching for her for about 8 years, 1 week before Christmas in 1979, my father came to pick us up at school, and we got into that car, and we drove 14 hours, and my father met his sister for the first time in 31 years. And it was an amazing moment, and at that moment I realized that that's what the meaning of faith was. Faith is what happens to you. Faith is what happens to you when you're doing everything you can, but nothing is going right. So ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to ask you, next time you're in a difficult situation, please remember to use the F word. But wait, what about the letter? You see, about 5 years ago, somebody took me to a charity visit to an orphanage in Guangzhou. And they took us to this room, and they brought in these kids to play with us. And there was this little girl about 8 years old. And when they brought in the kids, this little girl came running up to me and she gave me a big hug like this. And at that moment, I knew what it really meant to experience unconditional love. Because the feeling was so pure and so loving. And so I kept in touch with that little girl because I got a chance to see her about 2 or 3 times a year. And every time I saw her, I'd say, if you can, write me a letter. And every time I went to see her, I wrote her letters too. And I tried to tell her everything positive I could think of because I didn't know what her life was really like in that orphanage. Ladies and gentlemen, this past January, she was adopted by a family in America. And I got to see her one more time on Christmas Eve before she left. And I got the letter. You see, the letter is here. It took 5 years to get this letter. But I'm really glad I waited because that was the best Christmas gift I could have ever gotten. So ladies and gentlemen, remember the F word. Thank you very much.
Very good.